Well, thank you, Debbie. I don't feel so awesome today. Ask the people in the room. I'm Good morning and welcome to Summit Christian Center. We're so glad that you've joined us for church at home, church online. We are the Pipers. I'm Jolene, Jocelyn, and this is my husband Joe. And we're just so glad that you've chosen to spend the next hour with us as we celebrate our freedoms. And we just hope that you all had a great Independence Day. And first of all, too, I would like to thank all of our military personnel, those that have served in the past and those that are currently serving. We thank you for the sacrifice that you, and not only you, that your families have made. And again, just thank you for your service. We just invite you to worship with us, to participate with us, and we just pray that in this hour that you will just feel refreshed and encouraged in your heart and in your spirit.
I'm not letting go. Everything comes alive in my life as we lift you higher. Let your freedom arise in our lives as we lift you up. Sing it out, sing it out. Freedom. Freedom arise in my life as we lift you up. Sing it out, sing it out. Your freedom is here. Your freedom is here. I will not fear, I will not hide your love, your love. All of my cannot deny your love, your love. I will not fear, I will not hide your love, your love. All of my life I cannot deny your love, your love. Everything comes alive in my life as we lift you higher. Let your freedom alive in my lives as we lift you up. Sing it out, sing it out. Your freedom is here. Your freedom is here. And everything comes alive in my life as we lift you higher. Let your freedom arise in my life as we lift you up. Sing it out, sing it out. Your freedom is here. Your freedom is here. And everything comes alive in my life as we lift you higher. Let your freedom arise in my life as we lift you up. Sing it out, sing it out. Your freedom. Your freedom is here. Your freedom is here.
ransomed me, and like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me, and like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow. The sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine. Will be forever mine. You are forever mine. Jesus, we come to you today, God, as we've been celebrating our freedoms. And Lord, today, Lord, I pray right now, God, for all of our families and our children, Lord, that they've been, these last several months going through this pandemic have brought challenging times, challenging situations, God. And I just pray for each home, God, Lord, that there would be peace, there would be unity with husbands and wives, with fathers and daughters and sons and mothers, God. Lord, I just especially right now, I pray for the kids. Lord, their lives were turned upside down when the school doors closed, and there could be a lot of anxiety and anxiousness for this school year to come. But Lord, I just pray that you would just be with them, God, that there would be a peace that would come over them, and God, is that you would just keep them safe through the summer, that you would be with all the caregivers that are taking care of children and the teachers, God. We just pray, Lord, that you would give wisdom and direction, and God, the anxieties and concerns that they have, God, that they wouldn't face those, God, that things would be smooth. But Lord, I first of all really just pray for the kids of our country, God. Lord, that you would touch their hearts, that you would shape their minds, God. And Lord, with all the craziness and the fears that are that we're facing right now, God, I just pray that you would be with them, Lord, that you would help them not to live in fear, but that they would have comfort and safety and peace of mind, Lord. Touch our children, we pray in your name.
Good morning. As we continue in our service this morning online, today is our patriotic service. So Jolene just took step one of our steps of prayer that we want to specifically target as we celebrate Independence Day, celebrate our 4th of July, praying for our children and families and caregivers and teachers. And I want to continue this morning with our second step or second phase of prayer this morning, and we'll have a couple more later on in the service. And this prayer is for our nation. Obviously, we need prayer for our nation, prayer for our world at this point. So this includes local, state, and national government leadership. So I'm actually going to say a prayer that my Northwest Ministry Superintendent had posted on their Facebook page as a prayer for our nation. I did not ask his permission to use this prayer, so I'll have to ask his forgiveness later. But just listen to this prayer for our nation. 1 Timothy 2, 1 and 2 tells us, I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peacefully and quiet lives in all goodness and holiness. Father, as we celebrate the birth of our nation, we take time to pray for the United States of America and for our president, Congress, governors, and all those in authority as your word calls us to do. As we reflect on how your grace has preserved us for over 2 centuries, we call on you to continue your mercy. This is not because we deserve it or we have done anything to merit your goodwill. We make this request based on your grace alone, especially during these turbulent times. Thank you also for the men and women in all the branches of the service who serve us by protecting our freedom, especially those who have given their lives for our nation. I pray that you will call your people to prayer for our nation above the clamor of complaints as your word calls us to do. Your promise is that those of us who are called your people humble ourselves and pray and turn from our wicked ways, that you will heal our land. Remind us again that you are God and that we are not. We cannot save. That role belongs to you and you alone. So today, we pause and give you thanks for a great nation that you brought into existence and have called us to. With all our frustrations and issues brought to light by recent events, decisions, and rulings, our calling as followers remain the same: to pray for those in authority, to live peaceful and quiet lives in all godly holiness. Thank you, Father, for our nation and the role that you've called us to play. In Jesus' good name we pray. Amen.
God, we need you to heal our land. God, we need your touch. But God, we also come before you today, God, and we pray for our world. God, our world needs healed. God, we pray for those that are our allies, that are in support with this, God. We just pray too, God, that you would just help us to become stronger, Lord, and more united, God. But I pray for our enemies, God, because we have several enemies. And God, I just pray, Lord, that you would soften the hearts of all of the world leaders and dictators, God, that God, I know what the last days say, what your word says, but God, I just pray that God, that you would just soften the hearts, God, that we could have some kind of peace, Lord, that we would have an opportunity, God, for more people to come to you, God. Lord, that more people would be saved. And then I just pray for those that are lost in our world, that are dying. Lord, I pray for all of those that are so confused, and we're all fighting for different rights, and there's nothing wrong with having opposing views, but God, I just pray that in our opposition that you would help us to realize, God, that there's room for everybody. But God, that ultimately, God, I pray that you would just help us, Lord, to hear your heart, to hear your vision, to hear what it is, God, that you want us to do, God. Help us not just to be sayers, God, but I pray, God, that you would give us a vision for the world and know how, God, that we can even just make a difference in one person's life. Because if each person can help to make a difference in one person's life, and that person makes a difference in another person's life, God, there can be unity and peace in this world, God. And I just pray that, God, that you would just break those barriers and the things that are causing such chaos. Lord, we just bind up the enemy, God, because you are the true source of hope, and our hope is in you. No matter what happens from this day forward, God, we know that our hope is in you. And God, I pray for our military, for those that are out there, God. They're just being so disrespected right now, and our police officers that are so much hate towards them, God. I just pray that you would help those men and women, God, that are out there protecting us and doing the best they can, Lord, that they would just rise up with courage and with strength, God. Lord, and I just pray that the ones that need to be weeded out, that they would be weeded out, God, and that there would be respect for them, the ones that are doing the right things, the ones that are truly out there trying to protect our freedoms, God. And I just pray, Lord, that you would just reign supreme, Lord. As the song says, Lord, we need you. We need you to restore us. God, that you would bring us back to those fundamental truths. God, that you would heal our world. And Lord, I pray for those missionaries that are out there trying to share your word, God, that maybe they've been restricted right now because they're not able even to get back on the mission field. God, I just pray that you would encourage them, Lord. But I just pray, God, that your word would go forth. And that you would heal our land, Lord, that you would heal our world. Because we need you, Jesus. We need you desperately.
Good morning. Hello, Summit Christian Center viewers and all of you that are joining us online. We are delighted to have you with us and appreciate you joining us and your faithfulness to get online digitally in the time where we can't gather physically. We look forward to this time every week of being with you in your homes, wherever you're at, however you're watching, and just love your interaction and being a part of that as we continue to move forward. Yesterday was our national holiday that is set aside every year to celebrate our independence. I hope that you had a wonderful time with friends and family around food and blowing things up. There seemed to be quite a bit of that going on last night, even to the wee hours of the morning. Holy smoke. How many of you got more than 2 hours sleep? More than 3 hours sleep, whatever. It was pretty slim pickings for sleep last night as we celebrated, or our neighbors celebrated, independence. Today we're starting a new series called Staying Positive. And to kick off today's talk, the title of my message is Finding Freedom. Now, to give proper credit, the title and some of the content for this series actually comes from Life Church TV, Life Church, and Craig Rochelle. But I'm sticking with the title series, but today's talk comes from another message or another talk that I felt needed to be combined into this series as part of our 4th of July celebration, Sunday celebration weekend. This is a time when we celebrate our independence and honor the ones who fought and continue to fight for our freedoms. I thought about what our world looks like today, and I'm not so sure if we even know what real freedom looks like right now. It feels like our freedoms are under attack. When I decided to go with this Staying Positive series, I was like, we all need some encouragement with this right now as we've been in this shutdown and coronavirus and all this going on. On one level, there has been a level of anticipation for things to go back to what we used to know as far as gatherings with the phases that we're in and we're hoping to move to. But this week there's been a lot more news of increased numbers of those testing positive with the virus. This has led to more speculations of another wave bringing more possible shutdowns and setbacks, which none of us really want to see. And it has brought mandated masks, to which seem to bring another myriad of questions that are they really more helpful or are they more harmful? Maybe some of you states have the privilege of not being mandated that yet, but we are under that. So right now we don't feel like we have even the freedom to assemble the way that we used to. I will tell you that we made a difficult decision this week to push our physical gatherings back another 2 weeks. With everything that has been going on and everything that we have been going through, I just felt the need to remind ourselves to stay positive. We need to continue being positive as we go through these trying times. With that idea in mind, I also found it very difficult to feel like we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. With this being the 4th of July weekend, we celebrate freedom. As we talk through everything that's going on in our world, and especially our nation, we might even ask, where is our freedoms? I don't know that I have an answer to the dynamics of freedom or the lack thereof. What I do want to do today is talk a little bit about this idea of finding freedom and the challenges that it brings. As we dive into this journey today, let's look at the words of Paul in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 15. Paul tells the Galatians, "It is for freedom that Christ has set you free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourself be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." Paul is reminding the Galatians that true freedom comes through Jesus Christ. After all, it is Jesus who came to this earth to set us free. What is interesting to note is that Paul is making it clear that this freedom does not allow us to do whatever we want. That would actually lead us right back into slavery or bondage. The freedom he gives us is the freedom to do what is impossible, something that we couldn't do before, and that is to live a life of unselfishness. What I want you to know is that I did some research this week in preparing for this talk. As I proceeded with the idea of finding freedom, I couldn't help but think about the story that I saw a few years ago, after the turn of the century actually. 2003, many of you might be familiar with this story if you had kids or grandkids during this time. It's about a little fish that gets captured and taken away from his father. The father then sets out to do everything he can to find his son. In case you haven't figured it out, the story that I'm talking about was a movie released by Disney Pixar in 2003. Right now, some of you are turning to your spouse and kids and friends and celebrating because you already knew what I was talking about. That is Finding Nemo. I just couldn't help but think about Marlin, the father fish, in search of Nemo, his son, and how one situation after another situation led them both into different circumstances that infringed on each of their freedoms. That is not exactly the point of the movie, but it is this connection for me today of finding freedom, because we will meet some along the way that I see as in a search for freedom as well. And to be honest with you, I'm going to be spending most of the time today talking about Finding Nemo. If you have not seen the movie, then this might be a spoiler alert for you. However, it's 16 years old now, so if you haven't seen it yet, 17 years now. If you haven't seen it, that's on you. It's time for you to watch it, so enjoy the spoiler alert. If you have seen it, you might want to watch it again, especially if you have younger kids that haven't seen it after this talk. For me, I couldn't shake some of the parallels between Finding Freedom and the story of Finding Nemo. To some, this may seem more like a movie summary than a message or a talk. We play a game in our house with friends and family called Quiplash. It is played with a computer, and every participant uses a smartphone or a smart device. The game is played by filling in the blanks of two questions or challenges that is then put up against one other person's answer to the same questions or challenge. All the questions are then put on the screen at various times with the two answers for each question to be voted on for the best answer. The person with the most points after 3 rounds is the winner of the game. When answering the two questions, each round you have a set amount of time to answer it. Usually for me, and I think many others when we play this game, is that when you think of a response to the question or challenge, the first thing you think of, and once you think of something, it becomes very difficult to change it, even if you don't like the answer. That is kind of how the idea for this talk came to me today, or this week as I was preparing. Not through a game, but through this thought of finding freedom through Finding Nemo. And not being able to redirect my thoughts or come up with another direction, this is where I'm going this morning. That is not to say that what I think is bad and I couldn't come up with something better. This is just what dropped into my spirit, and everything I could think of was directed through this filter of staying positive, finding freedom, and tying this into maybe some principles or ideas that we could learn from in the movie Finding Nemo. I'm not saying that Finding Nemo is a godly movie, but I think that there's some great truths that can be drawn from it that can help us stay positive in our search for freedom. So I ask you to bear with me and see what God might speak to your heart today. First, let me say that when I said that I did my research, that means that I watched the movie again, okay? As I started watching it, I realized that I totally forgot how it started. It starts off with a clownfish couple, Marlin and Coral, excited about their first set of kids in the form of 400 fish eggs. As they discuss the kid's name, Marlin has the George Foreman disease and wants to name them all Marlin. Coral expresses a fondness in the name Nemo. They joyfully play until Coral's attention is drawn to a barracuda. Marlin tells her to hide, but instead she darts to protect those eggs. Well, the barracuda lunges and knocks Marlin unconscious back into his home with a flick of his tail. Marlin wakes much later to find Coral gone and a single surviving egg with a scratch on its side. He vows not to let anything happen to him and names the codling Nemo. I'm like, what kind of animation is this? As I watch this unfold again, this is a terrible start. It reminds me of when I watched Bambi as a little kid, when Bambi's mom dies. And the truth is this is a reality of life, is that we will experience loss. It is in his loss that Marlin becomes bound by fear. It affects the way he parents and the way that he interacts with the world. There are a lot of people who are going through or have gone through loss during this COVID crisis. Loss tends to affect us in profound ways. Our lives are forever changed by these kind of events. Nemo has a smaller fin on one side, which Marlin believes limits Nemo's ability to swim, and so he becomes a little overprotective now in the absence of his wife, Coral. On Nemo's first day of school, Marlin is nervous and not quite ready to let him go, but does reluctantly. It is after the students all leave with their teacher, Mr. Ray, that one of the other fish parents reveal their destiny to the drop-off. That's into the deep, the edge of the coral reef. With that information, Marlin freaks out. He goes right after them to discover that Nemo and a few of his new classmates are in a challenge to see who can go out into the open ocean the farthest towards a boat that is anchored out in the open water. The boat is mispronounced to be a butt. And it's a big butt, says one of his new friends. Nemo had no intention of taking the challenge until his father shows up and completely embarrasses him. It is Marlin's overprotectiveness that propels Nemo to disregard his father's instructions to not go out into the open ocean, which he had no plans of doing until Marlin told him he wasn't a good enough swimmer. It is with this that Nemo's determination to finding freedom from his father's oppression and limitation on his abilities. From here, Nemo is captured by a human diver and taken back to the boat. After being disoriented by a flash photography taken by a second diver, Marlin swims out to the boat to be caught in the propeller's current, and then he continues to chase until he loses the boat's trail. This is where the adventure and the lessons for finding freedom come to my mind. It was like the whole idea of finding Nemo was finding freedom, leading from one form of bondage or limitation right into another form of bondage or limitation. Please walk with me today through this and meet some of the people along Marlin's journey and Nemo's journey that are searching for freedom as well. To this point, we've met two of the main characters, Marlin and Nemo. Now let's meet some of the others. It is in his distress that Marlin meets a memory-challenged tangfish named Dory. I could stop right there and talk to you all day about how I identify with Dory. I'm about to put my name on all of the shirts so I don't forget who I am. I'm definitely memory challenged. And Marlin has to discover just how intense her memory loss is in order to keep her on track with helping him find Nemo, which she agreed to do. After meeting Dory, we are introduced to a great white shark who introduces himself as Bruce. He invites them to a party which excites Dory because she's all about the fun. Yay, a party, yippee, she celebrates, but Marlin is a little less enthusiastic. One, because he's on a journey to find his son. Two, because he thinks he knows what's on the menu. After insisting on their attendance, Bruce leads them through a party of balloons, otherwise you can see as minefield, and they arrive at a sunken submarine to join something of an AA meeting for sharks with Bruce's friend Anchor the hammerhead shark and Chum the mako shark. It's here that we find that these three friends are looking for freedom from the norms of their kind. The meeting comes to order with a pledge: I am a nice shark, not a mindless eating machine. If I am to change this image, I must first change myself. Fish are friends, not food. Aren't there some challenges for even us to change ourselves instead of expecting others to do that for us? So they're looking for freedom themselves and meeting together. They move to step 5, which was to bring a fish friend. After introductions, they continue with testimonies, which conclude with Marlin, where Marlin shows us that clownfish are really not that funny. Marlin discovers the diver's mask that fell from the boat and that it has some potential useful information if someone could just read it. In the scuttle with the mask, Dory is bopped in the nose with it, and it makes its way to Bruce's nostrils. And he's moved right past temptation to the pursuit of Marlin and Dory, with Anchor and Chum now staging an intervention. This reminds me of how important friends are. Proverbs 18:24 tells us that some friendships do not last, but some friends are more loyal than brothers. However, now in Bruce's pursuit puts Marlin and Dory in the fight of their lives. During all of this, it is revealed that Dory can actually read. But now they face the task of getting out with their lives and retrieving the mask, which is now in Bruce's mouth. They are able to get the mask back after a torpedo is dislodged from its tube and it is then wedged into Bruce's mouth. Bruce then flings the torpedo into the landmine, causing a violent chain reaction, causing all 3 sharks to swim away. Now we're up to Nemo, and he's placed in an aquarium in a dentist office, where he quickly learns limits of his freedom. Here we are introduced to some new characters, including Bloat, a pufferfish, Bubbles, a yellow tang, Peach, the orchid sea star, Gurgle, the royal grama, Jacques, the French accented Pacific leaner shrimp, and Deb, a black humbug that believes her reflection is her twin Flo. And no, she doesn't sell insurance for Progressive. We also meet Nigel, the pelican, as well as Gil, who is a wise old Moorish idolfish. And like Nemo, Gil came from the ocean, whereas all the other fish in the tank came from pet stores. We go back to Marley and Dory waking up in the aftermath of the explosion to the submarine, dangling on the edge of a deep ravine. And as they begin to move, the sub suddenly moves forward, landing on a rock wall. And in the chaos, in the blinding dust, Dory accidentally drops a mask down into the dark depths of the deep. With a love for swimming, she gladly leads Marlin in the darkness to coming up to a mysterious light. They discover that this mysterious light belongs to a hungry anglerfish. And this reminds me of the darkness of sin and how the Bible even describes the devil as an angel of light. 1 Peter 5:8 tells us, "Be sober-minded, be alert. Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion, looking for someone he can devour. They use the light of the angler to read the mask and then trap the angler in the mask as they swim away. Meanwhile, back in the aquarium, Nemo is awakened and taken to the tank's toy volcano, Mount Wahanahakalugi. Say that 10 times real fast. Here is an initiation is performed, and Nemo is given a street name now, or a tank name, Sharkbait, after the initiation. Isn't this just like the world? And it wants to put names on you, puts labels on you. We hear all kinds of labels being thrown out today. And we need to be reminded that you are not who the world says you are, but you are who God says you are. Here, Gil reveals his latest plan in a long list of failed attempts to escape by using Nemo to jump in the filter box, plug the motor, then swim back out the filter tube because he's small enough. When the tank gets dirty, the dentist will have to take them out to clean the tank, which they can roll the bags out onto the street and down into the harbor after he places them in plastic bags. After receiving directions from a school of marlinfish, Marlin and Dory are given directions to take the Eastern Australian Current to Sydney. They come to a rocky trench that the moonfish told Dory to swim through and not over. Dory could not remember what the moonfish had said, but felt like they should go through instead of over. Just had that nagging feeling. Not liking the ominous appearance, Marlin disregarded her caution and elects to go over. This decision brings them into an encounter with a school of jellyfish. They learn it is safe to bounce on top of the jellyfish, but Marlin makes it through the school of fish, realizing that Dory did not make it through. He returns to aid her through at great expense of energy. We move back to the tank where this is followed by the failed attempt of Gil's escape plan. And Marlin and Dory end up on the backs of the sea turtles, riding the EAC with other turtles and large fish. Gil's learned that his eagerness to escape is not worth the life of another. A good life lesson and some of the things that we may face. In between all of this, Marlin's story to go after his son and what he has gone through is passed from turtle to fish to dolphin to bird and reaches Nigel, the pelican. That tells us that people are watching our lives, watching our story, and sharing some of the things that we may be going through. At this, Nigel flies back to the dentist's office and tells Nemo, who now is invigorated and makes his own attempt to plug the filter motor, and he succeeds. During this, Marlin and Dory get off of the EAC where Dory attempts to talk to a blue whale while another whale comes up behind and pulls them into his mouth. And now the fish tank is completely covered in algae, and Nemo wonders if his father is out there waiting for him. Back inside the whale's mouth, Marlin and Dory remain safe enough with enough water to swim in. Dory's complacent and gleeful, while Martin is aggravatedly and futilely attempting to ram his way out of the whale's mouth. Aggravated at Dory's claim to speak whale, he laments over the fact that he will never see his son again. The water begins to drain in the mouth of the whale, and the whale lifts his tongue to push Marlin and Dory to the back of his throat. Marlin grabs a hold of the tongue and refuses to let go. Dory assures him that even though she doesn't know what is going to happen, that everything will be all right. I would have to tell you this morning that I feel very much like that. I don't know what's going to happen with everything that is going on, but no matter what things look like, with our hope and trust in God, everything is going to be all right. And yes, God speaks whale too. Now we are back in the dentist office, and the tank is clean after the dentist installed a new high-tech filter. Now the dentist is pulling Nemo out of the tank in a fish net. Gil and the other fish all swim into the net, and tell Nemo to pull down as the net is freed from the dentist's grip. Despite their efforts to assist Nemo, he is scooped up into a plastic bag and set on the counter. After attempting to roll out the window, like Gil suggested, he is placed into a tin to keep him from moving. And Gil assures him that he'll be okay. And then Darla enters the room. As Marlin and Dory swim to the harbor looking for the boat, they are picked up into the beak of a pelican. The pelican then lands on the docks and swallows them, and Marlin, determined not to be breakfast after coming this far, lodges himself in the pelican's throat. This awakens Nigel from a nap, and he flies down to assist, slapping Gerald, the other pelican, on the back, and out comes Marlin and Dory, where Marlin shouts out that he needs to find Nemo. Nigel recognizes the name and informs the other pelican, Gerald, that is the fish that we had heard about. He turns back to see them flipping down the dock to get away. Nigel chases after them, but quickly they all freeze to realize that they are surrounded by hungry seagulls. Nigel tells Marlin he knows his son and tells him to get into his mouth. He gets Dory and Marlin into his mouth and they fly off. Meanwhile, back in the dentist's office, Nemo is found floating upside down. The other fish realize that he is faking his death so he can be flushed down the toilet. In an unexpected move, the dentist grabs a bag and heads towards the trash can. Nigel is then forced into the room by Marlin, and the dentist drops the baggie to force the pelican back out the window. Marlin sees Nemo, believing that he's dead, and hollers his name, Nemo, as they are forced back out the window. Nemo hears his dad's voice and quickly flips back over. Darla then picks up the bag and begins to shake it. With that, Gil quickly lodges himself in the volcano while the rest push it at an angle, and the bubbles shoot him out, landing on Darla's head. That was Mount Wanahakalugi, and now is Mount Wanahakafish. Darla drops the bag which bursts on the table full of tools. From there, Gil jumps and flips Nemo into the sink using a magnifying scope. The dentist puts Gil back in the tank, where Gil tells the others not to worry about Nemo because all the drains lead to the ocean. While Nemo travels down the piping that travels on the ocean floor, Nigel flies out to the harbor, releasing Marlin and Dory and extending his condolences. In grief and disappointment, Marlin thanks Dory for her help and begins to swim away. But Dory pleads with Marlin to stay with her and that her memory is better when he's around. He refuses and continues on his own. I would say to you today that we still need each other even in these current times that we are facing. But after leaving the pipes, Nemo calls out for his father, and he ends up coming across Dory, who is confused, saying that she lost somebody and can't remember who or why or what. But after seeing the word Sydney, her memory immediately comes back, and they find out that Marlin is headed towards the fishing ground. As they reunite with Marlin, a fishing net sweeps through, gathering a large pool of fish, along with Dory. Learning from his experience earlier in the tank, Nemo tells his dad that he knows what to do. I need to swim in and tell the fish to swim down. Even though he fears for Nemo's safety, he lets go and allows Nemo to do what he can. He then instructs the panicking fish from the outside of the net to swim down as well. All the fish begin to do as instructed until they finally snap the rigging on the boat, allowing the net to fall to the ocean floor and the fish to swim to freedom. From here, the three of them return to their home in the reef. It is at this point that Marlin's demeanor has changed. He is now more upbeat and confident in his son's abilities, even with the smaller fin. As this movie comes to a close, we are back at the dentist shop where the dentist curses at the high-tech filter that has stopped working, and now his tank is once again full of algae. He notices all the baggies that he put on the fish in and left on the counter have disappeared. Horns honk as Peach is the last one to roll off the street and to land into the harbor along with the other fish. As all of them float on the open water in their baggies, unable to escape confinement, Bloat, the pufferfish, wonders, now what? Now I come to the end of this story, and I can imagine you thinking to yourself, I can probably actually see it in the room even, now what? Pastor, you mean to tell me that you told us this fishing story today and not a Bible story? We are supposed to be celebrating our independence this weekend, and you talked about a cartoon movie? Like you, I even struggled with not having more of the word in this talk. But as I thought about this idea of finding freedom, I could not get this story of Nemo out of my mind. Even as I tell you the story, there are many more biblical truths and principles that jump out at me, but for time's sake, I cannot dive deeper into all of those thoughts. All I could think of, though, was about how many ways, like almost every situation, we are looking for freedom, that we are looking for freedom. If you look at our circumstances now, everyone is in a search for freedom of some form or another. As we thought about finding freedom, it made me extremely grateful for the ones who have fought and continue to fight for our freedom and the freedom of our nation. It almost seems like to me that we get freedom from one situation to find ourselves right in the middle of another situation. And I just couldn't let go of all the struggles in finding Nemo and how it relates to all the struggles that we may be going through or have gone through right now. I know that talking about a movie seems simple, but this whole idea has been extremely heavy on my heart all week long. It seems that finding freedom is elusive. The minute we become free from one situation, we find ourselves in another one. From the beginning of this movie, I find so many freedoms looking to be found. So many searches by different individuals searching for freedom. Like Marlin, searching for freedom from pain after great loss and fear of not keeping a promise that really was impossible for him to keep. Or maybe you're like Nemo, searching for freedom from ridicule, from a handicap or a deficit in your life. Or maybe like Dory, searching for freedom from your own mental challenges. Enjoying life one minute, annoyed the next minute because she can't remember something. Maybe you've got a focus issue. That's me, amen. Maybe you're like Bruce, searching freedom from the social norms. You're tired of living up to everyone else's expectations of what you should be or look like, what you should or shouldn't eat, drink, or wear. Maybe you're looking for freedom from the temptations like the anglerfish light in our story. Maybe you're like Gil, looking to get back to the life you once had. Every effort you make comes up short. You would imagine that there are some other elements of the story that you could relate to, freedoms that someone could be searching for. I'll leave that for you to decide today. For me, finding my freedom does not come from what the world has to offer. My freedom does not come from the government or even political parties. My freedom does not come from restrictions or guidelines. My freedom does not come from wearing a mask or not. My freedom, it comes from serving the King of Kings. My freedom comes from trusting in the Lord of Lords. My freedom comes from being obedient to the leading of the Lord. My freedom comes from the fight for a right. My freedom does not come from fighting for a right. It comes from shining as a light. My freedom is found in following, loving God, no matter what circumstance I find myself in. We have circumstances all through our lives that we are facing right now. But to sum it up this morning, as we wrap this thing to a conclusion, let me share some verses in closing to anchor yourself in the idea of staying positive in a time that makes finding freedom very challenging today. Psalms 37:3, trust in the Lord and do what is good. Dwell in the land and live securely. Isaiah 26:4 says, trust in the Lord forever. He will always protect us. Isaiah 40:31 says, but those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint. If there's anything in the Bible that the Bible shows us, is that there is something that has happened in our history, shows us that there are things that are still happening in our lives, and that there will be things that are going to happen. And as we celebrate Independence Day, finding freedom is recognizing our dependence on God. God has not promised that nothing would happen to us, but He has promised us that He will always be with us no matter what happens. So if you're going to stay positive with everything that's going on in our world today, understand that finding freedom is finding hope in God for your struggle. Finding freedom is knowing God is with you no matter where you are. No matter what you're going through, finding freedom is trusting God. And I want to invite everyone listening today to say this prayer with me today and find freedom in Jesus Christ. Would you repeat this prayer? Heavenly Father, thank you for freedom that only comes from you. May my independence for life come from my dependence on you. Come into my heart and bring peace. Come into my heart and bring healing. Come into my heart and bring strength. Come into my heart and bring freedom to my mind, body, and spirit. In Jesus' name. Jolene's going to come back in a minute, but as she's coming back, I want to say a fourth and closing prayer over finances as we continue to wrap this up for Patriotic Sunday. For financial health of families, church, community, and country. Father, we are living in a time where there's so much economic uncertainty in everything that we're going through. May we, even in our finances, trust in you. Lean on you and put our hope in you, not in the government, not in even our wallets, but our hope in you. Lord, I pray for financial freedom in our lives, financial health in our families, financial health in our church, financial health in our communities, and financial health in our country. May you continue to lead us to you, and in our freedom, recognize that dependence comes in serving and following and loving you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Again, thank you for joining us today. As Joe mentioned earlier, we have changed our in-person regathering time. It was supposed to start next week, but it's been postponed to July 26th. So we will keep you posted. That's our tentative date. Hopefully that will still be the case, but that's our new date. More information will come out about that as we get closer. Excuse me. Also, if you have a prayer need, you can email us at prayer@summitchristian.center, or you actually can text 62488 with any prayer needs, or if you've just heard this today and you've accepted Christ, you can text the word saved. Anything, you can use that as to text them to communicate with us as well. I'm so sorry. Also, to give, you can go to our website at summitchristian.center and you can click the give icon. You can schedule a bill pay with your local bank, or you can mail your tithes and offerings into the church. And again, we love you, we miss you, and we just pray that the Lord will bless you and your family, and that you will have a good rest of the day. Sorry.
Upon
God bless you. Have a wonderful day and a continued celebration of the 4th of July weekend. God bless you in your freedoms.
See you next week.